Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Texas Ranger Association Foundation docu-series on Texas Rangers. And I'm real excited about our guest tonight. I'll let him tell a little bit about himself, but I'll tell you it's Captain Barry Caver, who was captain of Company E out in West Texas. And Captain, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Good evening, Matt. Glad to be here. I consider this an honor to be here to speak with you and the audience today, to share a little bit about myself. My name is Barry Caver. I'm a retired Texas Ranger captain for Company E. Spent almost 19 years of my last 19 years with DPS in the Texas Rangers and retired as a captain for Company E. I was also first stationed in Company A in Huntsville and spent about 4 years there. Was promoted to lieutenant and went to Lubbock and spent 3 years there as a lieutenant before making captain.
We're going to talk a little bit today, maybe a whole lot today, about a particular instance that you were leading the operation, and that, of course, is the standoff in Fort Davis, west of Fort Davis, in 1997, where a group called the Republic of Texas, a separatist group, I guess we would call them, decided that they wanted to act out, and it was Captain Barry Caver and 35 Rangers and about 300 other officers who came in and fixed the problem. This was in Jeff Davis County. Now, Jeff Davis County is huge. It's about 2,000 square miles, bigger than some states probably in this country. And the population at the time was somewhere around 2,100 people in the entire county. And for the law enforcement for that square mileage and for that amount of people was the sheriff and a chief deputy, a two-man operation.
Yep.
Does that sound right?
That sounds exactly right.
Man, I tell you what, whenever there is a group that moves into an area like that is so sparsely populated and is so immensely large, it can overwhelm any law enforcement agency very quickly. And when we talk about this group and we call them a separatist, tell me, what does that mean to you?
That means that that's a group or organization that doesn't want to conform with the rules and regulations or laws of that particular entity or state. And for whatever wild reason, I really honestly, even to this day, don't honestly believe they thought what they were spouting, that Texas was illegally annexed into the Union in 1845.
So would you say that this was more of an opportunist group, or were they a scam group, or were they true believers?
I definitely think they were a scam group, opportunist group, as you mentioned. I don't really think they truly believed what they were preaching or teaching these individuals. And I say that because, Richard McLaren was from Missouri. He wasn't born in Texas. He wasn't raised in Texas. I think they picked that particular area of Texas because it was so sparsely populated and a lack of law enforcement ability in the event that something happens. I think they felt like they could get away with that.
McLaren had what he called an embassy. He was structuring his fantasies as if it was his own government, and he was going to take over Texas and create his own government. And it kind of revolved around his embassy out there. And now this was a palace, is that right? Was it palatial in its construction? How would you describe it?
Yeah, again, we use that term very loosely when we say embassy. This was about a 1957 model travel trailer that had a couple of lean-tos built onto it.
Yes.
On the side of it, and it was, but they had the official seal and emblem over the front door.
Yeah,
so I guess that made it the official embassy.
I recall they had a flagpole too.
Yes, they did.
Yeah, flying their own flag.
They did.
Well, that's hey, it's a start, right?
There's no telling what this guy's IQ was. There's no doubt he was extremely intelligent, but he figured out a way to work the system and manipulate the system to achieve what his goals were.
Now there was this group, and we can throw a few names out. He may have been the captain of their defense force. And would it be fair to say that his arrest by the sheriff's department was kind of the catalyst to what kind of popped off in the next few days?
It was.
Tell me a little bit about what happened.
Well, this group was known to conduct a lot of maneuvers over the weekends. And they would get out and shoot their automatic weapons. They'd set up targets here and there. There's a lot of gunfire. And one of the sheriff's informants, if you will, his name was Joe Rowe. He lived at the second house upon the entrance to the resort area.
Sure.
So he was kind of their eyes and ears, would call the sheriff, tell him what's going on, how many people were there, what they were doing, that sort of thing. Well, the sheriff was out in that area, and this van drives by, and it was occupied by a guy by the name of Robert Scheidt, who claimed to be the lieutenant of their special ranger force. And you know, he made the fatal mistake in Texas of driving without liability insurance. So as the sheriff made the traffic contact, he began searching the vehicle and found a gun, knives, and some other things that were obviously against the law, and subsequently made the arrest. But I think it's after the fact that sort of what happened on the radio traffic that triggered this entire event.
All right, Captain, it was fair to say then that it was the arrest of their Lieutenant Scheidt that created the panic among the Republic of Texas members, and for whatever reason, then in their own minds, they focused on the Rowe family. Can you tell me what happened then?
Well, Matt, what triggered it actually was because, again, both counties' law enforcement agencies worked off one radio channel. Shortly after Mr. Scheidt was arrested by Sheriff Bailey, an unattended death occurred within Presidio County. And the Justice of the Peace was being called on the radio to respond to this particular residence to determine the cause of death. Well, again, during the mayhem and the panic on the Republic of Texas part, they overheard this radio traffic. They thought that Mr. Scheidt had been killed by Sheriff Bailey, and they were going to retaliate, knowing that Mr. Rowe was somewhat of a snitch or informant to Sheriff Bailey. Their idea or point was at that point in time was to retaliate and go to the Rowe residence and take them hostage. That's what they called a prisoner of war.
In their minds, law enforcement took their man out and murdered him.
Right.
That just blows my mind.
It didn't even happen.
Yes, yeah.
So
this was their act of retaliation.
yes.
And at this point, you nor any other ranger was on scene.
No.
We were not. You know, we had heard that they were making noises and just kind of being the neighborhood bullies.
Yes.
In that area.
Yes.
And the sheriff had anticipated problems, and by golly, here we are. We got a problem.
Yep.
And so they go to the Rowe residence and they attack it, basically. Right?
Yes.
Tell me about what happened.
They drive up. They use one of their vehicles to cross and block the roadway. There's like a cattle guard there. They surrounded the Rowe residence. 3 of them, Greg and Karen Paulson, along with Richard Keys. Those 3 attacked the Rowe residence. And when Mr. Rowe, I think his dog started barking, he realized something was going on outside. He looks out the door or the window and sees them at gunpoint. They immediately start firing in through the door. He grabs his pistol and tries to return fire, but he's struck by either a bullet directly or shrapnel. He's got known heart issues, and that caused a whole other medical issue.
Now, when the attack came, they approached the Republic of Texas people came up in armored vehicles, Humvees, and MRAPs. Is that correct?
No.
What were they driving?
It was some sort of a Subaru. I don't remember exactly.
It
what
was a
model
Monaco
it
or
was.
something.
Something like that. Yes, it was a pretty pathetic excuse.
Pretty pathetic assault vehicle.
Yes,
Is that correct?
it was.
And as I understand, for whatever reason, they blocked the cattle guard. How did they do it? Why and how did they block the cattle guard into this place?
Well, I don't know what they were thinking. Again, I don't think they were. But not only did they block the road to the cattle guard, but then they shot the tires out on the vehicle.
On their own vehicle.
On their own vehicle, so it couldn't be moved. So I don't know how exactly they planned on escaping.
That's a proven tactic, isn't it? Yeah. Okay.
Well, again, we're not talking about the sharpest knives in the drawer here. So
obviously, yeah. Once David is notified, that sets into motion a chain of events.
yes.
Phone calls to you phone calls to Austin, and we're calling in, as I said earlier, at least 35 Rangers. And you used as your negotiator a Ranger.
I did.
Who was it?
Just Malone. Actually, I started initially, again, you learn as you go.
Sure.
And I initially began negotiating with Richard Keyes and Greg Paulson when they first took the Rose hostage. But I quickly realized I can't negotiate and be the incident commander at the same time. It just didn't work.
No.
At that point, I asked Jess to take over my lead as negotiator, and you'd have to know Jess and understand him. He's got the gift of gab. He can talk the devil out of an ice water. Richard McLaren wanted to be treated with respect and dignity, even though typically we don't usually do that. That's not how we operate. But we felt like that was a real key to getting him back to the table again to talk about it, to figure out what it's going to take to get him to surrender. And so he ultimately later told me on that he wanted to shake my hand when this all was over with, and the fact that I did treat him that way. And even though he's got handcuffed behind his back, I have a photograph of him shaking my hand because that's what he wanted to do. And even when we went to federal court years later, he represented himself. I've never had this done before in federal court. Represented himself. He told the judge and the jury how much he respected me, the way the situation was handled, and I'm thinking, I don't even know how to respond to that, you know. I've been wearing a badge for 45 years now, and I've got hopefully about 3 more to go, then I'm gonna call it good. You know. But you know, I think being a servant is a calling. I really do. It takes a certain special individual. I'm not bragging on myself, but I just think it is a true calling from God. And the advice I would like to give new young Rangers coming in is the fact that when you pin that gold or silver badge on your chest, it means something. It's not just a piece of silver or a piece of gold. It represents almost 200 years of history, of legacy, tradition, and never take it lightly. It comes with a lot of responsibility, a lot of respect, but it's incumbent upon them to continue what you and I have started and what people way before us started.
Way before.
There's a lot that goes, there's a lot of weight on your shoulders that comes with that weight on your chest.